Good morning and aloha. Welcome to Streamline, Secure, and Optimize XenApp and XenDesktop deployments. I'm Peter Silva. I'm a technical marketing manager with F5. I cover security and access and mobile and a few other things. Also joining me today for color commentary, put your hands together for F5 SE Kevin Stewart. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
You know they are applauding, you out there. You just can't hear them.
I believe it.
Yeah. All right, why don't we jump right in? VDI continues to grow, and so first, virtual desktop infrastructure gives users access to any application from any device. And obviously, VDI can simplify desktop and application management. And also, some organizations are seeing that it's making it easier for them to also implement BYOD strategies. That would be the current trend of bring your own device. And according to the 451 group report, that's this slide right here, the server-hosted desktop virtualization opportunity is expected to be 1.1 million this year. And you can see the growth has gained considerably over the last couple of years. And then that little figure 8 there in the square shows that 94%, at least according to the 451 group, are enterprises that are deploying VDI. And it continues, obviously, to be a valuable investment, but there are some limitations, not limitations, but, as the slide says, some roadblocks, at least those organizations reporting why they might not be implementing VDI is the initial, cost of the outlay, the equipment, and so forth. It might be low on their IT priority. They might have other solutions in place, and it might be complex to deploy. So those are obviously things that IT kind of shies away from. But those organizations that have deployed VDI in the marketplace certainly see that not only their OS, but their application management becomes a lot simpler for them because there's that one instance in the data center and users are accessing those instances back in a single location, obviously. And then also helps them in those business continuity, workforce continuity, disaster preparedness type situations. Those are one of at least the 3 benefits that they see when deploying VDI. But VDI obviously comes with challenges that can frustrate not only the end users, the employees that are accessing VDI, but also the IT staff that is charged to then deploy VDI. And like any application on the internet, and that's one of the keys that you'll probably hear me rant about ad nauseum throughout this webinar, is that the VDI, at least as far as F5 is concerned, is just another application that needs to first be available and then quickly and securely delivered to the end user. And so things like this, these types of challenges, those are mostly what the user challenges are obviously key to a successful VDI deployment and then user adoption. You can, adopt it out, but if nobody uses it, well, that potentially could be a failure. And so things like complexity, mobility, security, reliability, and performance. And you heard me, already say at the beginning of this slide that these are the challenges of deploying any application out there, not just VDI. Now, specific to, since this is, kind of pertaining to Citrix XenApp and Citrix Desktop, when deploying VDI, it requires 3 tiers of equipment plus 2 firewalls, generally. So the XenApp and XenDesktop require 3 separate devices to manage access and connect users with applications, and most deployments involve 2 firewalls. You can see the firewall between typically probably in the DMZ or a little further out on the edge for the user devices, and then between that VPN device and then the VDI resources themselves. And so, for this, mobile users expect, seamless access no matter what device they're using. IT needs to support multiple vendors and computing platforms in the data center to ensure that IT mobility. But as you can see, as this, operational complexity and device variety grows, the security and scaling can certainly become a concern. Not only that, performance and reliability with all of these devices in there might become harder to monitor and achieve, and yet the users themselves obviously expect the same quality of experience and performance that they get from traditional desktops. And so these types of deployments might be hard to control access, hard to troubleshoot, hard to scale. There might be performance degradation. And Kevin, so pertaining to this, and I might just, click onto the next slide, why does Citrix really need all of these devices to support their VDI deployments?
That's a very good question, Peter, and really it comes down to some legacy infrastructure, some things that Citrix has had for a really long time that they've just never really been able to get away from. The Citrix web interface and the secure ticketing pieces have always been there, and have always been this albatross that they've had to deal with over the years.
And obviously, over the years, we're very well familiar with it, and the industry is that most of it is proprietary, right? Proprietary protocols and proprietary systems, and often, not to say they don't play nice with other systems, but anytime you go full proprietary, that interoperability with other sorts of devices within the infrastructure also becomes a challenge, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. And so kind of the whole tone of this, webinar is F5 makes Citrix VDI better. So we're, according to our customers, according to many analysts and research and so forth, the market leader in application delivery. And, we're not going to lie, Citrix is the market leader in VDI, but then together we can certainly deliver that best-of-breed application delivery solution. And so how do we go about doing those sorts of things? So on the back end, you might not realize that we both belong to a multi-vendor support community. We all realize, even though we often are very competitive in the marketplace, we all realize that, many times we have the same customers. Many times a lot of our equipment is interacting with the other's equipment. And so we belong to this multi-vendor community that then allows and provides that 24/7 collaborative support and, helps the customer satisfaction. Even though we might be, competitors in the marketplace, will come together, for the sake of the customer. We've also, on our end, really made a commitment over the years to making Citrix much easier to deploy for those that have the big IPs in place. And so integrating things like our iApps with XenApp and XenDesktop, offering a virtual edition of our big IP device for their Xen server. And then you can see here on the right a quote from Facebook from their corporate IT infrastructure, just talking about how good it's been, I guess, working with F5 in terms of keeping up with the changes in support. And you can think, a lot of times we may have to reverse engineer some of that stuff just because of the proprietariness, if that's even a word, of their solution. And so we, optimize it, simplify it, and then unify it, which is really key when it comes to access control and security. And so, we can make Citrix VDI better in three different ways, really. And so here in this slide, and I'll let Kevin maybe take over as we move along, but so the Big IP LTM and then the APM edition, so that's our Access Policy Manager, the module that you can add on to the Big IP LTM, and the APM provides things like AAA integration, so your authentication, authorization functionality. It can do things like host checks of the endpoint device. If you think about, say, a SSL VPN running on, TMOS, that's really what APM is. And so how does it simplify? So we can eliminate the need for 2 and sometimes 3 Citrix devices. And so you can see in this slide, maybe Kevin, maybe I should go back a couple, how do I go back? Yeah, previous. Can I go back? Previous. So So here we can see, right, Kevin, we got the Citrix web interface servers, we got the ticketing services, we got the XML brokers, and then if we go to this slide, it looks like some of those pieces are gone. So what does the LTM APM combo then provide that then eliminates a couple of those Citrix pieces of equipment?
Absolutely. So if you look at this, from the architectural perspective, it all comes down to, the Citrix XML broker is the brains of the operation. It's the guy that you have to ultimately authenticate to get your applications from, and then eventually get pointed to a server to provide you your actual application. In the traditional model of the web of the Citrix architecture, you've had to have a web interface, a piece that the client actually connects to actually you authenticate to, which then authenticates to the XML broker. And then they threw in a secure ticketing authority so that you couldn't just randomly, generate an ICA ticket and start launching applications without authenticating. And then they threw in the access gateway layer, so that you could have like an SSL gateway, on top of all these other pieces. And so if you look at this from the bare bones essentials, all you really need to do is talk to the XML broker, which is exactly what the access policy manager is doing. Mm-hmm. It's doing all the authentication pieces that the web interface would have done. It's presenting all the application icons the way the web interface would have done, and it's providing all that ticketing and security and SSL offload that the access gateway and the secure ticketing authority would have done. So you can get rid of all those components and super simplify your environment.
And then talking to super simplify, I kind of gave it away. Oh, the picture, right? So this consolidated architecture obviously reduces the complexity of troubleshooting, provides a common a common point of control to delivering Citrix VDI, and this is kind of where it becomes interesting too, because it's not just delivering Citrix VDI. It could be VMware View VDI. It could be Exchange. It could be other web apps. It could be file shares. It could be anything on the back end pertaining to the enterprise applications. And that's kind of the neat piece of it all. And here's just an additional slide. You might have seen these slides from F5, over the years. And, VDI is really all about virtualizing applications and delivering those applications to the users. And that has always been F5's sweet spot, delivering applications, being in that strategic point of control of the data center to make those intelligent decisions based on the user's context, where they're coming from, the type of device, the type of network, all of that pieces of information to then make an intelligent decision as to where best to deliver the content out of. So, the users and mobile devices, we've been moving around the world for 3-4 years now, and then with the advent of the cloud, now the stuff on the right, all the applications, all the resources, those are probably moving around the world too. And so it's making that intelligent decision of, okay, they're over there, they're asking for that, we're going to send them to this location. And it's all now in one place. So also to help make it make it easier for the end user, since that's, oftentimes the crux of why IT departments deploy such things like VDI, is that the same context and that device-aware solution, the APM from F5, will manage that local and remote access with support for things like multi-factor authentication and specifically single sign-on. And so obviously single sign-on means that the user enters their credentials just once, and in this little jump step slide, this is a situation where an organization may have deployed the F5 Edge client, which is just a downloadable client that interacts with the BIG-IP Access Policy Manager. But in this instance, as soon as you boot up your laptop in the morning, you would hit your Windows log on, the Control Alt Delete. And at that point, the credentials you enter there, username and password, there might be additional factors like a token or a secondary password or, piece of skin off the back of your left ear, who knows. And based on that information from that initial local login, it'll automatically then log you into your VPN and then ultimately log you in to your virtual desktop. So you get up, hit your Control Alt Delete on the computer, go get your cup of coffee or whatever you got to do in the morning, come back, and you're then, boom, right there in your hosted virtual desktop. And so that, speeds user access and improves user productivity. And there are multiple ways, actually, that we can support single sign-on. I'm going to move on to this next slide since this is really one of Kevin's areas of expertise. But what are, Kevin, the various ways that we can, support the single sign-on? I know we can do credential caching. We have SAML support. What else?
Well, that's the beauty of the Access Policy Manager. It really is a black box authentication magic. You can do any sort of authentication on the front side, form-based, SAML, Smartcard. For the federal government, it's CAC and PIV. You've got Windows Active Directory and LDAP support and Radius and TACAX and Oracle Access Manager, all these different ways that you can collect and vet user credentials on the front side. And then once you've got this credential inside the Access Policy Manager, then you can turn that into what you want. And so in this case, in this slide, we're taking a Smartcard credential and we're validating the user on the front side, maybe doing some revocation checks, OCSP, CRODP, whatever, and then turning that into an authentication mechanism that we can then use on the XenApp side to do single sign-on.
And so then once the credentials are entered, I see you got the dotted line for the ICA file and, say, that solid line for the XML file. What really does that represent then heading back to the user?
It's really just it's transparent to the user. The user is just passing a smart card identity, and then we're doing just two different forms of authentication. We may be doing, like, say, Kerberos for the XML broker side of it,
okay.
and then basically passing the ICA traffic through the BIG-IP, maybe rewriting some of the data so that we can actually provide the gateway functionality.
And for those who might not know, then the ICA is actually, one of Citrix proprietary protocols to then, send their resources over the network. Right? That's
correct. That's correct. It's a remote desktop protocol.
Got it. Yep. Within the BIG-IP now, and so what we're continuing on with those whole user experience. I just automatically popped into Unified employee experience. So once a user logs on to the BIG-IP Access Policy Manager, authorized users then can choose applications from a single portal. And this is what's called the F5 web top. You might not, when you log on to the APM, often you might get just your layer 3 network access connection, but more often than not, you might be then presented with this dynamic web top. It's customized for each employee and provides access to all the enterprise and cloud applications, including VDI. And you can see here we got, VDI from Citrix. I think there's also here's your VMware view. And this is really one of the coolest things because when you usually log on to a VDI deployment, a VDI environment in your specific desktop, you would then only get those applications, those resources that have been assigned through that desktop. And there might be instances where it doesn't give you all of your resources. You might have to, alt-tab to your browser and potentially go to another location, another file share, another cloud app, another SaaS, another something, to then get access to your other resources. And this is kind of the beauty of APM, is being able to offer up not only all of their VDI resources, as you can see, but also other such things like Salesforce, like their Google, like their SharePoint. And I did a couple of screenshots here. So once you click on your Citrix piece, your My Desktop, you're then this Zen portal piece, and you're able to then choose your Microsoft Office applications, your VDI desktop, any particular browsers that have been pushed down within that portal. And so that's pretty cool. You could then close that out and go back and then say, oh, geez, I got to go to Salesforce to then enter what I just did in Citrix. And the web portal allows you to do that versus, say, that now switching back to your browser, logging into Salesforce and entering that information. So, a bunch of additional steps that are immediately eliminated. And it's real easy to set up. It's real easy for the administrator to deploy. And so this slide shows the Visual Policy Editor. And we actually introduced this many, many years ago on our FirePass SSL VPN product to help organizations do a lot of those pre-host checks, choosing antivirus, choosing firewall. What do we want to check? It's real easy for organizations to also use this for auditing purposes. I know we've had customers, because of the flowchart-like way it's set up, so an auditor would come in and say, "Oh, what kind of checks are you doing? What are you doing for your remote access customers and protecting your environment?" And the IT guy would, print this thing up and go, "Here you go." And because it's very easy to deploy, very clear in what's going on, and it's literally point and click. You might not be able to see because it's a small screenshot, but within here, any of those plus signs are where you're able to, click on the plus sign and add another inspector to it. I don't know, maybe you want to check for a reg key, maybe you want to check for a certificate, maybe you want to, check a different authentication mechanism. All of your employees are in AD, and maybe your contractors are in LDAP. And so it's real easy to then not only, create the security that you need, but also then assign the resources like VDI. And then for those machines that might not be compliant or, don't abide by your acceptable use policies and what have you, there are also obviously ways to then remediate that, whether it be, pushing down a group policy to the machine. And that's kind of cool. The group policy enforcement is, allows you to push down like HIPAA and PCI and highly managed and all of these various group policies that typically are tied to Active Directory. And typically, to get group policy to work, is that the laptop, the computer has to be not only connected to, but part of the domain. And in this instance, the laptop, the computer doesn't need to be. We're able to push those down and control things. Like, for instance, shut off read-write on USB, read-write on CD. Don't allow them to go to certain locations. So it's really a highly granular and potentially quarantined environment. So it might not necessarily be stopping productivity. You're still allowing productivity, but in a very controlled and secure environment. And it also, some of the other little additional things that you might not be aware of that really help in terms of performance is things like offloading SSL. And so you might not be aware, but our BIG-IPs you're able to manage your certificates on there. You're able to terminate SSL on the BIG-IP, and offloading things like SSL computations, to the application delivery controller versus doing that back on the servers can really enhance, and you can gain a lot of your performance back in terms of deploying that application. And our quality of service type optimizations obviously ensure things like the best user experience, even for things like video. I mean, video is it already is quite huge. A lot of organizations are using it, not only for products, but for training, but for parodies. Probably one of the biggest things for video is parodies. But being able to then offload a lot of that server-intensive or compute-intensive functionality off of the servers on the back end, allow them to do what they're supposed to be doing, let the BIG-IP handle that, and it greatly reduces, or makes your environment a lot better in terms of performance, greater efficiency, and obviously happier employees. Another cool thing is being able to do global failover, and so the ability to move users, say, from one data center to another data center seamlessly, or even moving users from one server to another server within that data center very quickly is important, obviously, during, to keep that productivity going, potentially during outages. And many other VDI solutions have kind of limited functionality within this space. And so if you think about it, okay, cool, BIG-IP LTM has always been, that best-of-breed application delivery controller. And the way that we think about it, the same with those VDI instances on the back end. So, for instance, a user might be connected to a particular hypervisor in a data center, and for whatever reason, either that hypervisor or that data center itself goes kaput. Everybody thinks that, the cloud is the, magic bullet of all this, but, always remember that even though this nebulous term called the cloud is out there and high availability and so forth, clouds are still housed in data centers with 4 walls, with electricity, with cooling, with all the things you might remember from, the golden days over a decade ago with Exodus. So they still sit in data centers. They're still vulnerable to situations. I mean, earlier, like 6 months ago, that big storm out east, it took out many cloud data center environments. But in this situation, so they're connected to the hypervisor or connected to the data center. Those go kaput for whatever reason. The BIG-IP local traffic manager, in conjunction with the global traffic manager, so things like geolocation services, knowing the health of the various data centers, are able to then switch that user either to another hypervisor or even another data center without them losing their session. And so you might, think, oh, I lost the connection to the session and I got to log in again, I got to restart, all those. No. Let the BIG-IPs handle the failover. The user might notice a little, sort of blip on their screen, but they won't have to then re-log in. They won't have to then, go back to where they were located. So really that persistence helps preventing any of the broken sessions, which ultimately becomes, the user's going, oh, man, I got to do this again. No, you don't. You can just continue working, even though you might have been swung from, Austin, Texas over to Boston. They won't even know. Kind of cool thing. This is also pretty cool, the single namespace for global availability. And so, use cases for these things are like service providers or, say, customers that are looking to maybe unify a multi-data center VDI deployment. In this instance, you might also have various host names for certain departments or certain organizations. Sales.example.com, that's their VDI instance. Finance.example.com, that's their VDI deployment. And users might have to remember those specifics, whether it be based on their function, their organization, or even maybe their geographical location. You might type in east.example.com or west.example.com to get to your closest VDI deployment. In this situation, you would just actually send out one URL. It might just be, everybody.example.com, and everybody gets that URL, one single path that is easy for everyone to remember. And then you would let the BIG-IPs do their job, the GTM based on geolocation, and then ultimately the BIG-IP LTMs with APM to then resolve that. So they just remember the one URL, and then based on the user themselves and the type of information that is not only metadata that is passed, their location. Oh, obviously we know they're coming from this Comcast IP block out west. We're going to send them over there. We can already do that. And then based on their credentials or other types of configurations, would then send them to the most appropriate data center. And even within those data centers, those two BIG-IPs, there's data center 1 and data center 2. Say if there's a situation going on and some of their storage or some of their information is that other data center, those two BIG-IPs, even behind the GTM, can set up what's called an iSessions tunnel. It's an optimized, encrypted tunnel, and be able to send that information back and forth to each other on the back end, which is kind of cool. And so it'll, GTM sends them to the closest, LTM confirms that they're in the right data center, and if not, LTM will then forward them on to the correct data center if necessary, and proxying their authentication. So even though they might again be going from Austin to Boston, they won't have to re-log in there in Boston, and really no manual configuration necessary for these sorts of things. Oh, look, it just kind of followed me along. Nice. And so you might be saying, oh, my God, this sounds like a headache. Oh, my God, I got another device I got to configure. Oh, how are we going to do this? iApps. In version 11, we released this cool feature called iApps, and it really helps simplify not only XenApp VDI deployments, but a whole slew of other types of applications, Exchange, SharePoint, SAP, the list goes on. We used to have these deployment guides, and then version 10, we had the application-ready solution templates where it made it a lot easier to just, fill in the blanks, next, finished, and your virtual server was created, your iRules were created, your pools were created, real simple stuff. iApps, on the other hand, kind of takes it a step farther and really gets much deeper and much easier in terms of deploying these types of applications. And so you don't have to necessarily be a XenApp expert certified in XenApp to deploy a secure, optimized, and available VDI infrastructure. And so you can see here the virtual server questions: give us an IP address, give us another IP address. Do you need to route back? Do you need to use SSL? Do you need to offload? Do you need optimization? And after answering a few simple questions and clicking finish, that whole basic configuration is then done in less than 5 minutes, and you got your Citrix deployment up and running, and will automatically populate the pools, the iRules, the virtual servers, and various other pieces with the most optimal settings that are out there based on our testing, based on working with various partners, and so forth. So make it real easy for those administrators to deploy something like this without having to be an expert. The other cool thing is, while the application-ready solution templates in version 10 were static to the system, iApps are very dynamic to the system. You would get your iApps from our community portal, DevCentral. And the cool thing about iApps is you're able to also import new ones. And so you can see here from DevCentral the iApp, the updated XenApp and XenDesktop APM template. And you would download that iApp, upload it into your BIG-IP, maybe tweak it to your specifications for your unique specific environment, and then deploy it out. You might have maybe created an iApp. You want to share it with your other friends within your particular industry. You download it, you then upload it to DevCentral, give it a description, and it really then becomes a true type of community sharing within iApps, not only making it easier for our BIG-IP administrators to deploy such things, but also being able to share industry best practices with others, whether they're in the industry or not. The other thing is that professional services also provides things like the planning, design, configuration, and implementation required to help streamline the deployment of things like the XenApp and the XenDesktop in an F5 environment. So if you want to also maybe just get the experts in and allow them to do it, you certainly have that option. And so we're starting to get kind of, I think, somewhat close to the last few slides. And so we talked a lot about optimizing the user experience, like the web top portal mode, delivering all of those applications from the catalog accessible in that one location. Being able to do single sign-on for the end users, providing that seamless authentication to VDI, but also to things like their web or other application services on the back end that particular user's identity is authorized to see, which is pretty cool. And then things like the quality of service and being able to do multi-stream ICA. So the things like that, optimizing the real-time applications coming out from those resources, video, audio, voice over IP. Being able to support those multiple TCP connections, and each of those can be associated with a different class of service with corresponding priorities and so forth. You can really get down to the nitty-gritty in terms of how you manage those different types of applications going out to the end user. What demands, a little bit, what requires optimization, what might not require optimization right at that moment, based on the metadata and the context received both from the user and the health of the application on the back end within the data center. Simplifying everything. That's what, organizations want to do today. They're, reducing infrastructure and simplifying. Everybody wants to make things a lot simpler. And this is what this particular deployment does. It removes a lot of those extra pieces of hardware to make things like management, monitoring, and troubleshooting much simpler because it's a single location to check, that single point of control within the data center. The iApps obviously make it much simpler. Heck, I'm not, not really a high-end Citrix expert, but I know I can certainly deploy a Citrix XenApp infrastructure with an iApp. It's very, very simple. And then even having that native monitoring, just because our commitment to providing that to our customers who happen to have Citrix in their environment, monitoring that so that they know then what's going on within their VDI deployment. And then, obviously, unifying everything, access control, making sure that only those who are authorized and authenticated get in, making sure that the devices themselves are up to a certain threshold or standard and not become a risk to the organization once they get in. A very ultra-high performance firewall built in. If you're not familiar, the BIG-IP LTM and the BIG-IP platform itself, so it doesn't have to be LTM, it doesn't have to be ASM, it's the BIG-IP platform itself is an ICSA certified firewall. And so the BIG-IP will provide those firewall capabilities that you may need in these types of deployments. And then obviously, we haven't really touched a lot on it, and I'll actually put the pitch in now. Here's a commercial break. Welcome. We'll be right back after these commercial messages. So coming up on May 22nd, if you're interested, that's why I kind of got reminded by this little bottom icon. We are doing another webinar within the series called, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it touches on BYOD. It's really about mobile enablement, the mobile enterprise enablement, and we're going to touch on things like BYOD. That's May 22nd. Mark it in your calendars. And we're back. And so the F5 solution works with Citrix and VMware VDI security and access solutions, providing that user-based access security policies, both for those remote and local users. A lot of times we're thinking that these users are coming from their home or coming from a Starbucks or, being the road warriors. But in many instances, they're also sitting right there in the office connecting to their VDI environment. And that probably, creates some of the issues that they're in the office and they get this real high speed and fast response and to their stuff quickly. And then they go out, to that coffee shop, connect and, be scratching their head going, oh my God, what is going on? I want it like it was. A quote from Frank Ohlhurst. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he's been around for quite a while. Very well respected within the IT industry. He's talking about how APM eliminates much of that native Citrix infrastructure, that proprietary infrastructure, using our own tools to then better deploy, secure, and manage those virtual instances. I had that quote earlier from Facebook, but here's a little case study from Facebook and how they deployed the BIG-IP to secure their remote access and how it improved the Citrix VDI that they had deployed within their corporate environment. And so obviously these challenges were the reliable fast access, integrating tightly with XenApp, even though it's proprietary, getting those remote access users, but also protecting the infrastructure of from unauthorized access. A lot of people, say security is keeping the bad guys out, and while it certainly is about keeping the bad guys out, especially with a lot of the DOS attacks and other infiltrations we've seen of late. Security in a lot of ways is really about letting the right person in to the right resources that they need at the right time. Once they deployed this BIG-IP, and because it integrated tightly, they got all of the results that they were looking for, and it addressed many of the business challenges that they were faced with prior to deploying the BIG-IP. And clearly the quote shows that they're happy with the stuff. We got a few more little customer situations in terms of using F5 to deliver the Citrix VDI. You can kind of, read what they say, the configurability, and in this first instance, they were trying to deploy both XenApp and Exchange, a perfect situation in deploying the BIG-IP because they're just applications on the back end that need to be deployed securely and optimized to the end user. This large retailer they were looking at, they needed troubleshooting, their ability to scale, needed help. Again, being able to deploy the BIG-IP and having it scale appropriately for them. You can think about retailers at certain times of year, say the holiday season, where traffic just, massively grows, not only for their customers, but potentially additional hires during that time period. And then I think that social media one is that same one, if I'm not mistaken, as the Facebook one. So the BIG-IP is the foundation for application delivery. Citrix, many organizations are deploying that. It's proven. We're not denying that. We're not trying to, rip on, yes, again, we may, challenge each other in the marketplace, but in terms of, their VDI, it's pretty solid. It works well. A lot of customers love it. The thing is that, there are some challenges in there, and adding that BIG-IP ultimately makes the user experience better. It helps IT in terms of simplifying their infrastructure and reducing costs, and really unifies the security that's necessary when protecting those sensitive corporate assets on the back end. And kind of here we go again, right? The optimize, simplify, and unify. So VDI has been making consistent, increased presence in the enterprise for a number of years now. Improving user experience, security, and the management of those endpoint devices will become even more important to IT organizations as more of this kind of gets deployed, and the added dynamic nature of not only the mobiles but tablets and smartphones, and then the resources themselves in the cloud moving around. For organizations, moving to a desktop virtualization solution provides those IT organizations the opportunity to transform how they secure, optimize, and deliver desktop applications. And we contend that the BIG-IP with Access Policy Manager, BIG-IP LTM with the Access Policy Manager, can significantly improve Citrix XenApp and Citrix desktop deployments. And with that, we'll take some questions. You got anything to